Hi there. This is part 4 of my series on coaching with humour, based on Frank Farrelly's work on provocative therapy. I've thought about this one for some time because it's a while since I did one of the recordings, and partly I've been faced with some challenging personal situations, and it's actually because of those that I've started to think about another dimension of humour that's very important. I used to put the emphasis when I was training on how to be provocative, how to create that humour, but I'm beginning to think that it's probably even more important to learn how to take it, how to apply that in your own life, how to use humour as a way of rising above. With some of the circumstances that I've experienced, one of the pieces of advice that I got, which was huge for me, was to rise above what was happening. And the question, which is very much answered by NLP, is how do I do that? And just letting that question kind of resonate for myself. Eventually, one of the answers that came up, and there were several, was to use all that I knew about humour. And I've often said, and I believe that, the ability to laugh at yourself is a great skill to have. And it presupposes, if you look at the structure of that statement, to laugh at yourself, it presupposes that you're able to dissociate and step back from what you're experiencing, and therefore not be immersed in the emotions. And it was when someone who is on my master practitioner program, who was doing a modeling project, and they asked if they could model me on Skype, and they particularly wanted to model some of the ways in which I use humor in training, and she was doing a great job. I was really discovering some things for myself, some things I did intuitively and unconsciously, and I'm not sure if it was because she asked a question or just a connection started to get made for me, but I realized that in some of the situations I was finding challenging, I wasn't using this, and that I could. And that's the beauty of modeling, particularly, is that once we discover the structure of our abilities, we can use them in other scenarios. And certainly parallel funny situations came to mind. And without going into the details, I did recall Frank coaching someone years ago. And this person was talking about the relationship with their wife. And he eventually got onto the subject of communication and said, what's the nature of the communication between you? And listening to this, as it was done in front of an audience, I was expecting there to be him revealing in-depth conversations about, what they shared, what they found challenging. And so when Frank asked this question, what kind of communication do you have? This guy said, well, she says, pass the salt at the breakfast table. And I say, pass the butter. Well, that in itself was just bizarre. I found it very amusing. And then even more amusing was later on in the conversation. And they'd been talking for some time about their marriage and the relationship. And Frank asked a question, and this guy said, well, we have separated. And Frank said, well, for how long? And he said, 10 years ago, which was amazing given the way he'd been talking about it, but was funnier even that Frank said, has she noticed? Anyway, that came to mind, and that just gave me the humour to be able to think of my own situation and to see the funny side of it. And that was tremendous in terms of just changing my state for myself. So it's easy to be very involved in it and not sometimes recognise some of the great situations where we can use it for ourselves. And there was another scenario, which is just in general life. I had some time this summer with one of my stepdaughter's children, who I hadn't seen for some time. And I mean, my image has changed quite a bit this year, with letting my hair go white, for example. So I do look a bit different. However, this little boy who's 5, when he arrived, he looked at me quite blankly, and I said, "Do you remember me?" And he said, "No." He used to call me Grandsue. And first of all, I said, "It's Grandsue," and he went, "Oh," and he didn't seem to recognise me. So I said, "Well, who are you?" And he went, "Well, I'm duh." And I said, "Oh, I don't remember you." No, you're Fred." And he went, "No, I'm not Fred. And his name's Harry. I'm Harry." And I said, No, you're Fred." He said, "No, I'm Harry." Frank very often played with people's names. Something about the bigger message, the meta message being that actually this is about how we challenge our sense of self, our identity. Our name is our identity. And he went, I said, "No, you're definitely Fred." He said, No, I'm Harry." And then it's like the penny dropped for him. He got it. And I said, "Well, do you remember me?" And he went, "You're John." So from that point on, I called him Fred, and he called me John, and he joined in with the humour. It was tremendous, and it created a very special rapport. So even when I was leaving, because I left before him, and he came down, he went, "Bye, John." So I said, "Bye, Fred." And it just made a very special, unique connection. And so I'll conclude this with just sharing a couple of quotes. Well, one in particular, some time ago. I always love books that make me laugh out loud. And one author that does that is Anne Lamott. She wrote a number of books, but one in particular was called Bird by Bird. And in that, she says, laughter is carbonated holiness. And I just love that quote. And there was another one that I read recently that says faith can only be proven when it's tested and challenged. So the substitute for faith, beliefs, whatever you wish. And that was a quote by Oswald Chambers. And I think that's what the coaching with humour, the provocative style does. It tests what we believe. We discover what we believe by what's tested. And those tests might be life tests, they might be personal tests, they might be momentary relationship tests, but we discover the truth of what's important, and we find that truth in who we are. So I'll get back to the actual coaching side of it probably next time. Who knows? Depends what's happening in my life, and I wonder what's happening in yours.